December, I was talking to a friend about how Clash was about to see a resurgence in competitive play. 3 months later, we saw more Clash play in Stage 1 of the NAL than all of 2023 combined. Okay, that might be a bit of an over-exaggeration, but there's definitely way more use of Clash than you would have expected given how much use she's been seen in the past year or so. So how did I know this was coming? Well, there were 3 major reasons why I knew Clash was going to make a return.
When it comes to
you
this one
fucking Muppets!
don't turn around.
The biggest reason why Clash was played more is that the main counters to Clash are out of the meta. Callie might be one of the most consistent counters to Clash, but she's always been niche, even at the best of times, and with the utility clear looking much different than back in the 22nd meta, she's barely even picked nowadays. Zofia, the most in-meta counter to Clash, saw a massive drop-off once she was turned into a free armor, and Nomad has become less common, fading away gradually as we saw the flank watch role evolve and move away from dedicated operator utility and one guy looking at your flank for 2 minutes. Already, we've got some pretty big factors in favor of a Clash coming back. Without her counters being commonly used in the meta, clearing a Clash or any shield operator becomes much harder. Shield ops in competitive play have always been hard to deal with, especially when playing against a good shield player. Shields are almost impossible to kill in a 1v1 situation. More so now with the update, but that doesn't really affect Clash, now does it? The main solution to killing a Clash is to bait the shield out into a crossfire or some sort of utility that'll kill him. Good shield players will, in response, position in ways that avoid letting the opponents establish those crossfires, or at least make it as hard as possible. Those players will also be very skilled at avoiding or baiting out utility, one of their other main objectives in the round when playing these operators. With both Zofia and Nomad, countering Clash becomes a lot easier than just doing it without them. And it used to be that it wasn't a big deal to take one or both of them to accomplish that goal if necessary. Now granted, it still takes coordination, but it's a much easier and quicker affair for the attack when done well. The time save is also a big deal here, because another one of the goals of running a Clash is slowing the attack down. But again, Zofia and Nomad are out of the meta. Capitao is most commonly used as an execute op, so wasting the firebolts on a Clash is less than ideal, and Callie is still... So we've just got a field ready for Clash to make a return. But this is still only step 1. Zofia has been a 1-speed since Operation Solar Raid at the tail end of 2022. It's halfway through 2024 now. There has been over a year for people to notice that she's out of meta. Same with Nomad getting phased out. For me to have predicted this comeback, I needed a bit more than just 1 or 2 ops being out of the meta. The second reason is that cheese operators, like Clash, operate on many meta cycles. And by cheese operators, I mean ops that are viewed as gimmicky but effective, you know? Maybe a Glaz, maybe a Clash. They might not be impossible to counter, but if you're caught off guard by these kinds of operators, don't have the right utility, or aren't quick enough with the teamwork, these gimmicks can and will win you rounds. Gimmick operators tend to lose effectiveness when they're expected because part of the gimmick is the chaos caused by the surprise of the pick. Now, what do I mean by mini-meta? Well, the meta is the big picture way the game gets played, both defined by the strong operators and by the way the players want to play the game. The LMG meta is obviously defined by Finca LMG, but it's also defined by how the teams are using and reacting to that operator. The meta evolves slowly, relying on player development or balance patches to do a lot of the work, both of which tend to be slow processes to adapt and evolve. If you look at this wall on Clubhouse, it's called Kool-Aid. Why is it called Kool-Aid? Well, because in year 1, when it was left unreinforced...
Oh yeah! Able to get the shot into Vapo though, evening it out 4-4 with that trade-off. Shat is still in the back of Arsenal room though, and we've got Necroc still inside of the tunnel. Canadians pushing on in. He will be picked off by Shatta and then easily traded down by Young.
The meta responded to this by reinforcing the wall, which led to further developments. And now, after years and years of development, we're back to leaving Kool-Aid unreinforced, but for different reasons. The mini-meta is a smaller, faster, and more separated part of the meta. It doesn't follow the same timeline as the traditional meta, following the balance patches and player development, as it's more reliant on player mindset and perceived stock of operators or playstyles. It's a cycle that can best be seen with tactics. In my last Constitution of Siege with Fellow, we talked about the W7M bait against G2 in the SI23 Grand Finals. How W7M used a sense execute to bait out G2 while actually going for plant on a completely different part of the map.
What people started doing was they would use Sense's ROUs to create, a little wall when they drop Moto so they can get into sight and plant safely there. That's exactly what the Sen wall was in theory going to be used for. It was going to make enough space where you can drop Moto, not fucking die, and plant the diffuser safely, theoretically.
Yeah.
So because the enemy knows that, because they're aware of how every operator works, then they're like, oh shit, they're using a Sense wall to plant. We have to counter that. And then while they're so focused on that macro aspect, there's another entire little cosmic play happening in the other side of the basement where they're like, okay, now they're focused on this. Let's go plant in the other side because it's free. The site's free.
This execute would be part of the mini meta, as it's a tactic that came out, became very common, evolved, played off of, and eventually faded out of relevancy because it became too predictable or too easy to counter. At this point, the tactic usually dies forever or gets brought back later down the line from some nerd that remembers the past and decides to use it as a pocket strat or something completely different thanks to a new operator or balance patch adding a new dimension to this strategy. If you look at mini-metas, operators are a big factor. Sends for that church execute that I was just talking about, for example. But this is the case even more so for cheese operators because their gimmicks work less and less the more they're expected. It's why you saw Blitz and Ying ebb and flow in popularity irregardless of what was going on in the meta over the years. These two have stabilized since then, but for a lot of this game's life cycle, Blitz and Ying kind of emblemized being that gimmick operator that could win you rounds right up until it became too common and everyone was ready for it. Clash's mini-meta cycle has been on ice for quite a while, which makes it easy to say in a broad prediction that she was going to come back at some point. When you start seeing Clash's counters out of the meta or on the downturn, that starts looking like prime opportunities for the operator to get brought back and abused. For stage 1 of 2024, Clash's mini-meta cycle was primed to restart, and that brings us to the third reason that brought Clash back. The spark that kicks off the explosion of this new mini-meta cycle for Clash. The third reason is that the player perception of Clash and her stock was low. This comes into play in my follow-up explanation to my friend. These cheese operators are best used when their perceived stock is low, and the key word here is perceived stock, not actual stock. As these mini-metas end, especially with the gimmick operators, they end with a low perceived stock. This is because these operators have been seen often enough that teams are pretty well drilled on how to deal with them, and they're perceived as less effective at accomplishing that goal they want to do. You know the song and dance that they're going for, and so even if it's annoying to deal with, the operator is less influential and less of a big deal to address because they're getting dealt with more efficiently. Competitive teams have this sort of checklist of things that they want to go right in the round, and if enough of them get checked off, they'll win. For an operator like Clash, that checklist would look like wasting, say a minute of the attack's time from a certain position or draining X amount of utility from them. When playing the Clash or any other cheese op gets less effective at accomplishing that checklist, it starts being less desirable to play them over a more standard pick that's a lot more consistent and, in Clash's case, would give you an extra gun just up all the time. So as a result, Clash's stock starts to go down as teams' opinions on how effective she is went down. But as time goes on and these operators lay dormant, teams change. They get rusty on how to deal with these operators, or forget the value that they had because, they're not that hard to deal with, not realizing that they've had 5 roster changes in over a year since they last had to deal with a Clash all that often. And so the true value and perceived value of the operator slowly drifts apart. Remember, niche operator picks are never bad, They just become more effective the less expected they are. All this led to Clash being in a great place to start being played again. All her natural predators were out of the meta, and she's always been a solid niche pick. But the real kicker is that her value on the player's stock market was way too low relative to her actual value to a team. Teams and players hadn't experienced playing against a Clash consistently in so long that reintroducing the operator to a defensive lineup could totally steal a round or three. All it takes is an adventurous player to notice and say, hey, Geometrix is really good as a Monty on attack. What if we slap him on the defender's version of Montaigne? And that's exactly what we started seeing in the NAL. With Stage 1 over and the LCQs coming to a close, oh my god, this is slow. Where does this put Clash and her mini-meta? Well, if I had to guess, and it's looking like it's playing out as I record this during the major, we'll see some Clash play in Manchester. But it won't be as surprising as it was during the regular season, and thus it's going to be less effective and less common overall. Clash will go back into stasis, if I had to guess, and we'll likely see another niche operator come into the fold for Stage 2. That, or because shields are so powerful right now, we're going to see more and more Clash just to be a shield operator for the defense. We'll see. Who do you think are some operators that are primed to come back with their own mini-meta cycle like Clash, and who do you think are some operators that are going to fade out of existence to cause that to happen? Let me know down below.